Yo, what's going on, everybody? It is Thursday, March 10th. Markets rebounded off the lows today, still closed lower. Primary driver was the war situation, and that is going to be, got to get used to it because that's going to be the headline risk for as long as this thing keeps going on. Sanctions are still in place. We saw some bit of a recovery, not a recovery, but I guess a pause in recent trends. For example, in oil pulled back a little bit today. Wheat prices, some commodity prices pulled back. Hard to say if that is temporary or if it'll be ongoing. I suspect that the sanctions will continue to have a long-term effect, pushing up prices for raw materials. So we'll see. I mean, this is a very, very complicated situation. I mean, when you try to, make an analysis of this, it looks kind of simple on face value. Hey, sanctions, another supply shock. But we don't know. It's very hard to know the extent to which the sanctions are being, they're finding ways to go around it. China obviously continuing to buy oil from Russia at deep discounts. The United States banned Russian imports, but Russian exports of oil and gas still flow into Europe. It's very hard to quantify. And like I said yesterday, if you listen to the mainstream media, if you listen to the Western media, that's all propaganda. You're getting propagandized, you're getting lied to. So it's really hard to get a handle on what the truth is. I try to follow many different media outlets. The West, I just kind of brush off. I mean, you look at the biolabs. There was an article, I think I saw a video on this earlier today. I did see a video on this earlier today that cited a USA Today story a couple of years back talking about how Russian claims of US biolabs were bogus and Russian propaganda and this and that. USA Today, which they call itself America's newspaper, they basically shit all over that story, saying how it was just a bunch of cockamamie nonsense that was made up. And, yesterday we literally had, Victoria Nuland, Under Secretary of State, Victoria Nuland, who had to tell members of Congress that, it's not only there, but we're afraid it's going to fall into Russian hands. So, I mean, had you listened to the USA Today story back then, you would have been, saying, oh, that's bogus, that's Russian propaganda. And it was completely outed by someone who is so inside the deep state and so involved with the whole Ukraine situation going back to 2014 with the US-backed coup against Yanukovych. I mean, so if you're listening to the mainstream media, you're getting propagandized, you're getting lied to. Same thing going back to the Iraq weapons of mass destruction. I mean, all the major media outlets, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Times, all of them, they backed that story 100%. And when it was proven to be false, nobody came out and said, okay, we were wrong about that. We took the wrong point of view. The government fed us a whole bunch of lies and we ran with it. No, it was nothing. They're never held accountable, or very rarely held accountable. Now, I'm not saying the other side doesn't try to do the same thing either, but that's what makes this whole situation so difficult. It's very hard to find out what the truth is right now. Remember yesterday I said, the first thing that dies in war is the truth. I also said that the first thing maybe that is born in is the truth, as we saw with the biolabs. But it's often the truth is the first casualty of war. And it's just been an incessant propaganda campaign. Now that thing By the way, that also plays into economics. We don't really know the extent of the economic impact. I mean, we see gas prices going up. There's no doubt about it. You're feeling it. You go fill up your car, it hurts. We're seeing that. That is a concrete, observable effect of these sanctions. And I said, going back when they first started to really pile on these sanctions, there's going to be blowback. I made several videos about that, saying that there was going to be blowback. It was naive to think that the United States can create, and its allies can create this, this vast array of sanctions against, a country which represents an enormous amount of global exports of raw materials and commodities and strategic things, and not expect to feel any blowback from that, like to be completely isolated. Now, the United States probably is in a better position than Europe. Not probably, almost certainly is in a better position than Europe, but it doesn't mean that we're not going to feel anything. So Russia's still continuing to export oil to China, albeit at a very deep discount. China is going to be the main beneficiary of this because they're going to get all that cheap energy, and energy is essential to powering any economy, any industrial economy, that's for sure. Europe is going to be the main loser. The United States is going to feel an impact, as we're feeling an impact already. Politically, you see Biden running around now, or trying to, make up with countries like Venezuela and Iran, countries we sanctioned, countries where we made it impossible for them to export oil. And I talked about the hypocrisy and the cynicism of that, especially with Venezuela. I mean, that was a poor country. We didn't like their political leader. We didn't like Maduro. So what do? I mean, we sanctioned them to hell. Food, medicine, all kinds of things, humanitarian things. And now we're running back there just for the oil. Not saying anything about, I didn't hear anything about them removing the sanctions on other things that are in place. It's very cynical and it's very hypocritical. It should not be the behavior of a great power, at least not in my opinion. Great powers shouldn't act that way. They should be leaders. They should set an example. Anyway, we got a very strong fiscal right now. We're starting to see countries, I mentioned that Germany is going to up its fiscal response because of what is going on with higher expenditures on military, on defense, and energy. I saw today Sweden is going to increase by 2% of GDP its expenditures on military and defense. You're going to see that throughout Europe. There's no question about that. The euro pulled back today. ECB is not doing anything. They're not raising rates. Think about the Fed raising rates right now in an environment where costs are going up for everybody, and where those costs are hitting, those who can least afford it the most. It's hitting the middle class, it's hitting the lower class. If you got to buy gasoline, if you got to buy food, every percentage increase, that has a huge impact on those incomes. And now the Fed is about to raise interest rates, which is, going to increase the debt service burden, something I talk about a lot. The debt service burden is going to go up. What is that? That is a cost. The cost is going to rise. This is why this whole belief that raising rates kills inflation, it may do that in the end when it creates a demand shock, when you raise costs high enough to the point where incomes can't keep up and then everything collapses. That's an economic downturn, and maybe at that point, it relieves or cures the inflation problem. But that's like those old barbers who were practicing bloodletting as a form of medicine. Like, oh, you don't feel good? Well, the problem must be in your blood, so we're gonna drain your blood out. Oh, look, the patient died. Yeah, but we took care of that original problem, didn't we? Same thing going on here. I mean, it's just absolutely, we're on the brink of World War III, or we're in World War III. Maybe we're on the brink of nuclear war, and the Fed is raising interest rates at a time when costs are rising everywhere. So they're just going to contribute to that trend by raising the rate, which is going to raise, borrowing costs. It's going to raise debt service burdens. It's going to make it that much harder every month for people to manage their debt. So, and it's not going to really hurt the rich because, they're the ones that are holding treasuries and they have savings and that additional income. I always talk about that rate hikes are a redistribution of income. But primarily, this is going to be a redistribution up to the upper echelons of income, because those are the people who own treasuries. Those are the people who own, who have large amounts of savings. It's not like the middle class or poor people. They don't have a lot of savings. They don't have any savings. They don't have any treasuries. So, I mean, you're going to get it. You're getting I mean, it's really, when you think about it, it's unbelievable that this is the approach that they're taking at a time when people are hurting so damn bad. Now, if you ask me about the stock market, I understand, obviously, everything I just said and the impacts of that. But again, the economy doesn't flow out. It stays in. The income doesn't flow out. The income stays in the economy. It just gets reshuffled around. Unfortunately, it gets reshuffled up to the top, but those are the people who are more likely to buy stocks. More worrisome, I guess, is the income that does flow out. And, I've spoken about that, and that is the imports of oil, which are a net transfer to the foreign sector. Now, in the latest week, we're only net importing about 675,000 barrels a day. It fluctuates, okay? The latest reading was about 675,000 barrels a day combined of crude and refined petroleum products. So we're basically, in balance, I would say, where we're not really net importing that much and we're not net exporting. So we can go now for a while with higher oil prices. The income stays in the economy, but again, it gets transferred around, it gets reshuffled around. Unfortunately, a lot of people are going to lose that income, but it stays in the economy. Now, you might not like me to say that, and I would even agree with you. Like, I hate that it's being, funneled up to the top or funneled into the coffers of oil companies. But sometimes as an investor, you just have to step back and understand the macro picture. Not sometimes, you always have to understand the macro picture, because that's what's going to give you your signal as to whether or not conditions are okay for certain assets. Those, I'm referring to the stock market right here. So I think the stock market is going to recover. We have, like I said, Fiscal is very strong. We're still running near like a 740 billion monthly flow rate. They just passed this 1.5 trillion discretionary spending bill. I think that's going to bump up the monthly flows to over 600 billion. We're going to stay there. And that's a good, that's a good flow. We're talking, that takes us back to, like May, June, July last year. And, those were the good times. Market was going up, making new highs during those times. So I think we're back there again. The war, the war continues on. I don't think the Ukrainians have any chance. By the way, that 1.5 trillion includes 14 billion in support for Ukraine. And supposedly that goes to food and medicine and humanitarian, but I suspect the bulk of that is going to go to military support, Javelin missile launchers and stuff like that to blow up Russian tanks. We're just like, it doesn't end. We're in the forever war universe, Twilight Zone. It's not funny. Like I'm trying to make a half joke out of it, but it's not funny. It's really terrible. It's a terrible, terrible thing. And hopefully it ends soon. I mean, so many lives lost now. It's just tragic. It's awful, man. We just keep pushing and pushing for war everywhere. It's a profit center. It's a major profit center. President Eisenhower warned us about this at his farewell address. Be careful of the military-industrial complex. But now it's not just the military-industrial complex. It's the military. It's the intelligence. It's the media. It's the industrial complex. They're all combined. And, they're just sucking every resource from us to perpetuate and to amass, more and more profit for themselves. And it requires a major, major enemy and constant fighting and constant threats and constant war to justify these trillions upon trillions. Which, by the way, the question of how are we gonna pay for it is never ever asked. Think about that. When it comes to the Build Back Better plan or infrastructure or single payer Medicare for all or student education or college education or unemployment benefits or food stamps or anything like that. Basic science and research, the environment, when it comes to anything like that, it's always, well, how are we going to pay for it? But you need $14 billion for Ukraine for Javelin missile launchers. Boom, you got that, no problem. All right? Boom. Anything. You need $1.5 trillion for the F-35 fighter program. Boom, you got that. Nobody ever asks how you're going to pay for it. The helmet alone, I just put this up on Twitter today. The helmet alone for pilots who fly that F-35 is $400,000 just for the helmet. How are you going to pay for it? Boom, there's the money. So that's where we're at. I think fiscal is strong. By the way, let me just mention that the Fed QE is over. Yesterday was the last day. We'll see what happens. Like, remember that there were dire predictions about the day, that the Fed was going to exit. Dire predictions. So let's see what happens. All right, everybody. Talk to you tomorrow. Bye.